Now you will hear the lecture Prayer, the Wonder Power by Swami Brahmaviharidasji. Ji.
In the divine presence of Bhagwan Swaminarayan, in the equally divine presence of my Guru Hari Pramukh Swami Maharaj, in the revered presence of Pujya Adhyatmanand Swami Ji, Pujya Brahmprakash Swami Ji, all the revered sadhus who are present, in the most affectionate presence of Mukesh Bhai, Anand Bhai, Kaushal Bhai, Dvanit, and so many people whom I really value as friends. And first thing I wanted to share with you, it's not just you who are happy to see me. I am perhaps happier to see all of you this evening. I would like to congratulate the organizers, especially Mukesh Bhai, for arranging the Happiness Week. 7 days of happiness. It's an achievement. When I read that Napoleon himself confessed that after winning half of the world, he said he had not seen 6 days of happiness in his life. Congratulations, Mukesh Bhai. Why it is an achievement? Because to be happy for a day is easy. To be happy for a week is difficult. But to be happy for life, it's a challenge. The real reason is, do we really know what makes us happy? We are hunting for happiness, searching for it, trying and vying for it. But do we really know what really makes us happy? What if God just descended right now on this podium and he announced that all of us have only 10 minutes to live? You say, Swami, how sankalp karo cha? Don't worry. I am saying, what if? What if God descended on this podium and he announced that all of us have 10 minutes to live? Swamiji, aap and hu sahid. And then he says that go and do one thing that makes you the happiest. Go. How many of us seriously would have a clue? I think majority would just sit here and say, let the time come. But there may be a few who just want to buy. Will you buy a new car? Would you buy a new bike? Would you change the house you really want? Would you change the curtains? You know, somebody told me that if you want to change the world, change it before you get married. Because after marriage, you can't even change a TV channel. If you had 10 minutes, would you go down and settle an old score with somebody who has hurt you? Would you go and seek forgiveness from your parents? What would you seriously do in 10 minutes that would make you the most happiest? I think majority don't have a clue what really makes us happy. And that's why happiness, which is a very simple word, becomes more and more complex as we start thinking about it. Then we get all the experts, so many people advise, people like us give you katha and philosophy and everything. We always listen. When the sadhus say there's no happiness in the world, we would say yes. But internally you are saying no. And it's our experience and there's nothing wrong. I'm not trying to tell you it's your personal experience. There's a difference between an understanding, an imagination, a philosophy, and reality. We get so many experts, economists, sociologists, anthropologists, thinkers, social thinkers. They have come up and invented a new word. They are trying to reduce happiness into pure mathematics. And they have come up with this idea of the happiness index. I think most of you might have heard the happiness index. I'm not against it. Who am I to challenge anything that comes up on the global scenario? But then they say that obviously the happiness index, Bhutan is somewhere right at the top and India is somewhere right below the middle. So does that mean all of us want to migrate to Bhutan? See, reality is one thing, statistics are something else. Whenever we are told, and I ask people in this audience or outside, I said, how are you? How are you happy? He says, I'm average. And I really get worried about averages, Because if somebody tells you that on average this river is 4 feet deep, don't cross it. At the shores it's 4 inches, in the middle is 40 feet. Average बहुत dangerous बात है. In England we used to have a saying that if your head is in the oven and your feet are in the fridge, on average you're in a comfortable position. See, people have this કે કેવું ચાલે કે average સારું છે. But ultimately, we have no clue of what happiness is. And that's why we have no clue of prayer. Because basically, our biggest prayer in our heart is a prayer for happiness. Because we don't have a clue what happiness is, we can infer we have little clue what prayer is. And that's what we want to discuss and share this evening. Can we focus? Can we fluff out? Can we peel off the layers that hide the real meaning of both happiness and prayer? Similarly, prayer, it's like a birthright. It's the force that is common for all. There is only one energy which is there when you are born and which is there when you die, prayer. Nobody can restrict you. Everybody has a right. But you know what happens? When prayers are born in your heart, they're very innocent. When they come to your lips, they become cosmetic. You have to arrange and say the right words in the right way. There's all this correctness, social correctness, political correctness, all this is there. So when prayers are born in your heart, they are innocent. When they come to your lips, they are cosmetic. And by the time they reach God, my God, they get complicated. I'll give you an example, wait, Mukesh Pait made it so easy, I'm going to make it really difficult. When they reach God, I sometimes wonder and worry what God would do. I'll give you a classic example. When India and Pakistan are playing cricket, it's almost like a war. Two teams are playing and both nations are praying. Billions of prayers go up. Who should God make to win? God gets confused. There are billions of prayers. One saying, make India win. And the other says, make Pakistan win. That's not an issue here. I'm trying to say when your prayer for happiness brings unhappiness to somebody else, that prayer is slightly complicated. Now ask yourself privately in the corners of your mind that whether our prayers for our happiness, if they bring unhappiness to somebody else, should God answer them or not? Tell me. Then don't complain. Majority of our prayers would be bracketed in that way. And I just want to make sure that when such a thing happens, it gets so complicated that we can't find a real solution. I'll give you another classic example when our prayers sometimes are detrimental to the people around us. When we were in England, there was a humorous tale which was often quoted. And I want to upfront tell all of you that there is no racial slur intended. But I want to tell you, as we had heard and we enjoyed, that once there were 3 people, once a Scottish, a British, and an Irishman. They were all 3 friends. They went into the Middle East. And out of some difficulty or some thing went wrong, all 3 of them were banished to the desert. And when they were in the desert, they were struggling for food, water, and the heat literally melted them. They were on their last reserves, about to die. They started praying to God. God, help us. God appeared in the middle of the desert and God said, yes, you cold? They said, yes, God. Obviously, the British said, it's my turn first. he explained to the Scottish and the poor Irish, okay? He said, my turn first. And God said, what do you want? He said, God, just grant me one prayer. God said, yes. He said, God, if you are really God, British way, right? Obviously, God is God. He's appeared from nowhere. He said, God, if you are really God, all I want is one cold beer in the corner pub of my street. Suthu. So he disappeared from the desert back to England. Corner pub of his street. The Scottish took a cue. He said, God, if you are really God, then I want one last dip in one of the lochs, the beautiful lakes of Scotland. Obviously, you can't bring a lake in the middle of the desert, so God said it'd be easier to transport this guy. So he disappeared. Then God turned to the Irishman. He said, what about you? He said, God, in this middle of the desert where there's nobody around, we were three friends. I suddenly feel so lonely. Can you please bring back my two friends? Most of our prayers are like this. For the sake of happiness of ourselves, we disrespect the happiness of others. That's why our prayers get complicated, because we are so focused on our personal happiness. You probably came here to think that Brahmavihari Swami will be giving us some ideas which will make us. I have come to give you ideas on being happier. But perhaps, as Mukesh Bhai said, not the way that you think. If we believe so much on exclusive happiness, that we've forgotten that happiness has to be inclusive. So prayer should be the basis of an inclusive way of life, inclusive happiness. That's why Yogiji Maharaj, Pramukh Swami Maharaj is Guru. He always said one thing and one thing alone all his life, even when he was about to sleep, when he was waking up, after puja, when something good happened, when something bad happened. He would always say, Bhagavan saunu bhalu karo. અને આપણે ભગવાન સૌનું ભલું કરો આટલાનું તો નહીં, બ્રેકેટ્સ હોય. We have parentheses and we have a huge list of names where you say, આનું તો નહીં જ. We don't have that heart to pray like that, inclusive prayers. More than Yogiji Maharaj, Bhagavan Swaminarayan laid the foundation of the Swaminarayan Sampradaya, and he writes in the Shikshapatri, Sarva Jiva Hitavaha. Your life, your ideas, your prayers, your emotion should be that it brings joy to every living being. Sarva Jiva Hitavaha. The great Indian wisdom, the Subhashits, they teach us, Sarvetra Sukhina Santu, Sarve Santu Niramaya, Sarva Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukhamapnuyat. Let all be happy, let all be healthy, let all see good in each other, and let none be miserable. Look at the prayer. We belong to a culture which talks about inclusive happiness, inclusive prayer. But the climax are the oldest documents in the world, the oldest manuscript of mankind, and they are the Rig Vedas. The Rig Vedas, in the times of our rishis, they had pondered and contemplated and almost solved every issues that were faced by the humankind in that time. And they touch upon every aspect from life, emotions, mind, philosophy, medicine, spirituality, every aspect of the human life. And you would be surprised, the Rig Vedas have turned every aspect into a form of prayer. What are the Rig Vedas? They are prayers to the divine for the things that you and me seek in the form of a prayer. So it's important. Prayer is a simple application to God, our want. But there's a difference. To your juniors, you order. To your seniors, you ask. To your elders, you request. To your owners, you beg. And to the Creator, you pray. It is important. It's the same thing we are doing. There is nothing else. But the tone, the feelings, they change because your entire communication and connection changes. So today my topic is the power of prayer for inclusive happiness. Happiness for all. Only then a prayer is powerful. If you don't have this inclusive idea, then your prayer is weak, it is meek, it is not the wonder power that we are talking about. And let's see, so far as we concentrate and focus on exclusivity, suppose you go out just now because there's a back entrance. If anybody hasn't seen it, there is a back entrance here. Okay? And if somebody goes out and there, some kind, generous fellow, he gives you the iPhone 6. That's the in thing. That's the in thing. Suddenly when you get the iPhone 6, you feel so happy. You feel exclusive. But the moment you enter into this hall, if all 2,000 people wave an iPhone 6, so suthai. Instantly your happiness disappears. I want to tell you, we live on and live off exclusivity. Dress different, walk different, think different, wear different, live different, carry yourself differently. But I'm trying to tell you, there is no eternal happiness in exclusivity. There is only happiness in inclusivity. And if you understand that, we will be walking on something else. First of all the visible symbols we see in life, perhaps they are not happiness and they are not even worth praying for. For example, just because we laughed just now, does it mean we are all happy? Yes or no? Come on, think a bit. I'm not here just to hear yeses. Just because we laugh, does it mean we are happy? Because sometimes a madman laughs, a serial killer laughs. Sometimes when we are bored, we laugh. Sometimes after getting so angry, we laugh. Sometimes we just laughed for no reason. We laugh and say, what was that for? I don't know. So laughter does not just mean happiness. Similarly, just because you cry, does that mean you are sorrowful? I have seen, and you have seen, so many sports people after they win a gold medal or the Wimbledon or the Open Tennis Championship, they break down into tears. So laughter is not just a symbol for happiness. It's beautifully put down by Charles Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin, during his difficult times, he was one of the finest actors. He gave the media movie a whole different scenario. But he writes in his own difficult times, and when he was passing through critical moments, he has written that I alone could make the whole world laugh, but the whole world together could not make me laugh. If you are suffering from a bout of unhappiness or depression, it becomes a whole different thing. Laughter or tears, visible symbols, just move away. There is a different world which is slightly borderless, and that's what we need to penetrate to understand the concept. Similarly, what we pray for, sometimes we pray for laughter or joy, sometimes we pray for power. In these times, when we start praying for power, we think the Prime Minister, the President, or the President of a nation that is important would be and should be the most happiest person. But is he? After almost 24 to 28 elections and sub-elections which Abraham Lincoln had lost, continuously he had kept losing, and after that such a huge journey, he enters the White House, and the White House chief portrait painter, Francis Carpenter, who would always paint the first face of the new president. While painting Abraham Lincoln, Francis Carpenter has written that I painted the saddest face on this earth. He said, I couldn't imagine, he was literally dripping misery. કલ્પના સારી છે. Literally dripping misery. Power and happiness have no connection. It's an illusion. We sometimes think that there is a connection, but there isn't. What about fame? Everybody would think, no, Swami, fame, yes. Fame makes you feel happy. Look at Michael Jackson. I don't think any one of us could even ever dream of such fame, such popularity. When we were young children, I know before we became sadhus, so I know that world as well. So I don't think any one of us could even dream of such fame and such popularity. But you know what he said? It hurts to be me. It hurts to be me. The older generation which is here, because I don't want to leave them out, let's talk about Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley had fame, wealth, popularity, success, and he introduced new trends into the music world. But when he died, he had almost 10 different drugs in his bloodstream. But he has written about himself, and he has written that my life, Sambarjo, my life was like a ping pong ball bouncing on a rough road. Haywire. Happiness, what we technically pray for. But then we have the ancient traditions. Look at Lord Buddha. He renounced everything that we pray for. શાંતિથી વિચાર કરજો ઘરે જઈને. He renounced everything that we pray for. Power, wealth, comforts, security. Everything that you and me, if you club your prayers and make segregation, everything that we pray for, Gautam Buddha renounced. And he got what we don't have, happiness. Imagine, if you look at it, that how Gautam Buddha, and that's what Lord Krishna has said in the Gita. Lord Krishna has said, Tyagat Shantihi Anantaram. It is not in attachment that you find happiness. It is in detachment that you find happiness. Krishna has gone one step further and he says to Arjuna, Ashantasya kutaha sukham. He said, his whose mind is disturbed by desires, by emotions of love and hate, by jealousy, by anger. His whose mind is constantly in a ripple and unbalanced, where is peace for him? So ultimately, if you want to experience the greatest power of prayer, we need to pray for a stable mind. And if we can do that, then you are automatically vaccinated. It's like spiritual vaccination. We get so many different things and diseases coming over. The moment we are vaccinated, it takes us into a different world. So let us understand the most important part, that if to enter the mind, if happiness is a state of the mind and not a state of affairs, which we have seen. If happiness is not the physical things that we have, it is the internal, the mental, the spiritual things that we have. If that is so, then if there is any power that can penetrate and enter the state of the mind, it is the power of prayer. And why do I say it is the ultimate power? And why would I say it is perhaps not the last resort, it is the only resort? I would want to correct, I cannot correct, Mukesh Pai, but I want to say it's not even the first resource, and it's not even the last resort. It is the only resort, prayer. Why am I saying this? Because all these things, because the earlier speakers who have enlightened you, Swami Adhyatmananji and other speakers, and with all due respect, all the other ideas, whether it's motivation, whether it's values, whether it's positive thinking, they all help in happiness. But all of them are your individual effort. Prayer is the only force which is a combined effort between you and God. And when you have a combined effort now in the recent environment of elections, you and God are a majority. Forget about the world. If you and God are on the same page, you are a majority. And when we understand that we have the support of God, it makes a big difference. Once there was a young boy in the courtyard of his home, there was a huge stone. His father asked, okay, go and move the stone. The young boy started pushing it, pushing it, started thinking, but he could not do much. After 1 hour, the father is moving across and the young boy says, Dad, I can't move it. The dad said, you know, try your hard. Use all your strength. He said, Dad, can't you see I'm using all my strength? I'm pushing it, pulling it. It just doesn't move. The stone is so huge. I'm so small. Dad said, you are not using all your strength. He said, I am. He was perspiring, heaving. And the stone wasn't moving. He said, Dad, I am using all my strength. He said, no, you're not. You have not asked me to help. The fullest strength of a son is the help of his father. The fullest strength of each of you is the help of God. Most of the time, that's why prayer is the most profound power that we have. And the reason is because it's a combination between you and God. It's not you alone. And when we understand that, as Mukesh Bhai had mentioned, I want to say that, of course, it's true. And I don't think all of you can blame yourself. We do use prayer as a spare wheel and not the driving wheel. And even if our car keeps getting punctured again and again, and we have to constantly repair our spare wheel again and again, we still tend to use prayer as a spare wheel. And why? In all our times of crisis, Bhagavan dukhi nathi, huh? He's happy. I'll tell you why. I want to explain to you why. Don't worry about it. You know, in our times of crisis, catastrophes, difficulties, challenges, we always reach out to God. Once a man who was an atheist all his life, and he fell ill. And his illness created so much pain, that he literally started shouting, God, where are you? And God suddenly said, yes, you called? He said, God, why have you given me so much pain? He said, to start a conversation. He said, all my life I've been trying to talk to you when you were young, when you were a teenager, when you were a youth, when you were an adult, when you were successful, when you were glorious. You never bothered, but a little pain, and you said, God. So sometimes God gives you pain just to start a conversation. It is important. Don't get worried about it. Don't get shocked by it. It is little jogging you and waking you up and to make sure that you start talking. The most famous philosopher, Schopenhauer. In his philosophy, there was no God. And he was an atheist, a confirmed atheist, and he relished the idea of being an atheist. But when he fell ill during his death time, in his death time, he started shouting, God, oh God, oh God. And some of his teachers, some of his sishyas, they came down and said, hey, Schopenhauer, there's no God in your philosophy. He said, in suffering, no philosophy is complete without God. That's why perhaps Voltaire, the father of rational thinking, he says if there was no God, it would be necessary to invent him. For the safekeeping of society, for the safekeeping of our mind and our stability, for the comforts that we find. So, God, prayer helps you to connect. In pain, prayer helps you to comfort. It gives you comfort. You might have heard of a very famous Hollywood actor, Steve McQueen. In the 1970s, he was the highest paid actor in the world. Because he was a former army man. Because he was a great actor and flamboyant. He was arrogant. Arrogant to such a level that when he was the highest paid actor in the world, for 4 years continuously, he refused to act. આપણે તો ધંધો ચાલતો હોય તો કરી દેવો પડે ને. 4 years continuously refused to act. This was the arrogance of Steve McQueen. He needed nobody. He cared for nobody because everybody needed him. But when he discovered that he had cancer, it is said there was such a transformation that he started spending all his mornings and evenings, even his afternoons, lost in prayer. And then he writes that I was trying to find a cure and I found God. છે કોઈ ફિલોસોફરના શબ્દ. I was, so don't be disheartened by the difficulties you have. Maybe they are leading you to a certain level where which will refine and hone your spiritual abilities, and you will discover something else in you, inside you. And that's why Lincoln often said that many a times I have been so miserable that if I divided my misery, unhappiness equally upon all the people of this earth, there would not be one single smiling face on this earth. હવે આવું દુઃખ તમારે છે. So much pain. And he often said that sometimes when I find that everyone on this earth has deserted me, quote unquote, and when I find there is nobody next to me or with me, but at that time when I look deep down within my heart, I still feel that I have one friend left and he is God and he revives me. Prayer has that power to rejuvenate you. Wherever you are, whatever difficulties you have, stop feeling pity for yourself, thinking that you are the worst and the most difficult in situation. You still have the ability to reach out to God and rise out like a phoenix bird from the ashes of your own misery. If you can do that, prayer has the power to bring you out. But then I also want to take you through examples and facts that sometimes you might find that it's not misery, it's difficulty, it's just fear. I'd like to take you to the Second World War. The Second World War was perhaps the most horrible war the world has ever seen. It is estimated that somewhere between 60 to 85 million people died. એવું નથી 200-500 સરહદો પર 25 મર્યા, એવું નથી. 60 to 85 million people died in that war. Okay? And the climax was, all the sane thinking, there is an estimate that almost 61 countries participated directly and 101 countries participated indirectly. 100 countries at war. It's a really horrible scenario which we can't even take. But then I want to still take you further. That in that Second World War, the most crucial date was 6th June 1944, D-Day. I think all of you must have heard the name D-Day. The code was, you know why I'm telling you, I'm not an expert on war, but when I was a young child in school, I did a special project on the Second World War. That's why I'm telling you. આ કોઈ શાસ્ત્રમાં નથી વાત આવતી, તમે કહેશો કયા શાસ્ત્રમાં આવે. But this is history, this is pure history. And D was the day. H was the hour. The color of that war was orange. And the code of that war was Mickey Mouse. This was how well this D-Day was planned. Why? On the British side, across the English Channel, there were 3 million soldiers of Britain and American and all the Allied soldiers had lined up. 3 million. On the French side, that means Germany had won almost everywhere till Normandy. There was a whole wall of more than 80,000 to 100,000 fully equipped and armored German military, army. Now the problem was, when should they go? How should they land? It wasn't easy. Eisenhower, Montgomery, all the other, the leaders were coming down, discussing, and no, it took them 23 days just to think yes or no, how confusing it was. You're putting the life of almost 3 million soldiers in jeopardy. They all knew that there will be heavy casualties. You're going by sea, they're sitting on a cliff, then climbing almost 100 foot onto the cliff. It's impossible. If anybody gets a chance, you should read the description of D-Day. You would know what heroism is, what bravery is, what faithfulness is, what fear is. Every emotion of the humankind you will get in that. Now what I'm going to tell you, that before there were boats, 54,000 cooks. They had special priests trying to keep the spirit of the soldiers alive. Sadhuopan, they were there trying to help the people on the fighting. The climax is, when all the soldiers, the 150,000 who were going to go on the first day, when they all got lined up, they were carrying tons of equipment, guns, rockets, grenades, equipment, ammunition. They did not have even the strength to carry even a handkerchief more, it's described. They refused to carry photographs of even their loved ones because it was too much weight. And when the war began, to your and my surprise, 67% of the soldiers were carrying a small Bible in their pocket. See the power of prayer? It's not in the description or the protocol of the army to give everybody ke banduk apo, ammunition apo, ane Bible apo. No, it was self-willing. Prayer has the power to convert fear into faith. It has the power. Otherwise, I'm giving you incidents from history to bolster and embolden your own life and our lives. It has the power, and if you think about it, it takes you there. To bring it to very close, day-to-day life, every exam time, our mandirs are flooded. When the exams are going on, little children, they flood. I'll tell you very truthfully. They come, and wherever we are in the temple, they'll find any sadhu. And just say, Swamiji, give me a photo, give me a murti, give me a photo, give me a murti. Exam times it's flooded. And during result times, again it's flooded by parents. See, children want to get through the exam and parents want to make sure they pass. There's no link between them. If they link, then it would be easier. But ultimately, I'm trying to say that we do use prayer and our part as a part of our spare wheel in the times of crisis. But I'm saying it's not wrong. What's wrong if you connect to God for whatever reason? There's nothing wrong. But think, if in your crisis, prayer can give you comfort, if in your fear, it can generate faith, if in your helplessness, it can give you hope, if in your aimlessness, it can give you aim, in your crisis, if it can give you comfort, then what if you do it regularly? Imagine what it would do to you. My idea is simple. There is no compulsion because religion has to be as gentle as a breeze. You should enjoy it. The moment I start forcing you, it becomes a gale. And you'll shut your window and go away. If all religious leaders understood this, that we have to be as gentle as a breeze, it would turn religion into magic. So fine. Use it at a time of your crisis, but also think that if you use it regularly, it can bring you so much more benefit. But there is a subtle question. Again, Mukesh Pai said that you should not doubt a prayer. As a sadhu, I must also explore this issue as well. We do doubt. Shanka thai. And again, it's a human trait. If we don't discuss it here, where will we? And I know I'm treading stormy waters when I'm starting this issue. But I think it needs to be faced and grappled with. Sometimes the bull has to be caught by the horns. A very famous Victorian scientist, Francis Galton. He was a mathematician, a statistician, who invented eugenics. And that was done in 1872. Don't think eugenics is a modern world. 1872, he invented the idea of eugenics, morphic relations. Okay? Francis Galton. He writes, Shantiti Sambarjo. He writes, and which really threw me off balance. He writes that if prayers really worked, then the British king and queen, they should be the oldest living couple on this earth. Because every day the British people, morning and evening, they pray, long live the king and long live the queen. When they pray every day, how come they are not the longest living couple? That means prayers don't work. હવે શંકા થશે, હવે શંકા શરૂ કરો. You know, suddenly, then you might argue and I might argue okay, because they were not praying with their heart. Now this is my question. That if prayers worked, then all the religious leaders of this earth should be the longest living people. Because obviously their devotees really pray sincerely. સમજાય છે ને? હવે શંકા લઈને કરી ન જતા, let's try and answer this. Now my question is very simple. Suppose you said a prayer and it didn't work. Can you scientifically say that prayers don't work? Just because your prayer didn't work? Just because you can't climb Mount Everest, can you say that man can't climb Mount Everest? Come along where I am coming from. How many of us are going to reach the moon? Come on. How many from the 7 billion people have gone to the moon? 1, 12? And if you count all the population of the humankind ever since the first man walked this earth, it will be billions and billions and billions of billions and billions of billions of people. If just 2 or 3 people have reached the moon, is it right to say that we can reach the moon? Yes or no? Why are you so confused? Yes. Our society, understand this, our society, our culture, our science, it grows because of single successes and ignores the mass failures. Just because Edison experimented 10,000 times and he could not get light, does it mean we will live in darkness? All he has to do is to make one experiment work and the world is in brightness. All if in this whole earth, if 7 billion prayers did not work, even if one worked, then prayers work. We build on the successes or not failures, even you and me. Now I want to ask you, everybody present in this hall, have you not had even one experience where your prayer has worked? Bolo motethi. Then why am I standing here and giving you a lecture? How many times do you have to touch fire before you understand it is hot? Once, and not even once sometimes. On the experience of others, so at least learn from the experience of others that prayers work. Even one has worked, it is going to work for you and the world. Because our civilization is built on that. Look at our hope. Just because we are having wars after wars after wars, despite so many wars, do we still believe in peace? Despite so many divorces, do we still believe in marriage? Tell me the truth. હમણાં છોકરાના તો કરાવશો જ. I have seen 2 divorcees making sure that their child gets married. I go, wow, this is experience. I'm just trying to say, so despite our difficulties, despite so many deaths, do we still believe in life? So even if your prayer now and then sometimes is not answered, still believe in prayers. One day they will be. If you have this ideology and climate, nothing can go wrong with you and me. We can move ourselves to different heights, and I want to ask you, and let's see if we can understand. The most important part, and I want to take you through history as well, that even if one incident confirms that prayer works, This is how society moves. This is how single breakthroughs move. You know, you might know that the power of prayer is believing in the things we can't see. And the reward of prayer is seeing the things we believe in. If you believe in things, even if you can't see them, and through prayer, you will be able to see the things which you can't believe. Incredible things happen in this world. And these are some of the examples I want to spread before you, that they are totally undeniable and they are not done by us or his or somebody else. They are obvious facts in history. Everybody must have heard of the mission Apollo 13. Apollo 11 went to the moon. Then the 7th manned mission, Apollo 13, it took off on 11th April 1970. 3 astronauts commanded by Jim Lovell. There was Hayes, and the 3rd astronaut was Swigert. All 3 were there. Everybody was happy and thinking this is a 7th manned mission to the moon and man would be landing on the moon. When they were about 200,000 miles away from the Earth, very close to the moon, about to enter the lunar orbit. Okay? What happened in a rocket? I will not take you into a deeper science, but I think you should understand there is the service module, which is huge. Service module, which has the power, the oxygen, the fuel, everything is in the service module. Above the service module, you have the command module, which is small. Then you have the lunar module, which separates from the command module and goes into the moon, lands on the moon.